And we're doing it. Iron Lion Radio, episode 3, steroids. Yeah, I think we got to talk about them. They're just a major element of gym culture, especially in 2017, that it just is a topic that we can't ignore. So I don't know all of what I'm going to talk about, but I can tell you what this video is definitely not going to be talking about. I'm definitely not going to be telling people that they should be taking steroids. I don't think that's a good idea. And it's also just not my message. Today I want to talk more generally about how they fit into the health and fitness culture, but also society at large. So let's talk about what I mean when I use the term steroids. We're actually talking about a specific type of performance-enhancing drug called anabolic androgenic steroids. And when people use the term steroids, they're talking about performance enhancement or muscle growth. That's the kind of steroids that they're talking about. So what are they? These anabolic androgenic steroids are basically testosterone and derivatives of testosterone. And obviously, testosterone is something that men produce naturally. And you may not know this, but the body cannot tell the difference between testosterone it produces naturally and the synthetic stuff you give it. And I'm not trying to argue that steroids are safe, at least not right now. But what is true is that nobody dies of a steroid overdose. If we get into the potential negative consequences of steroids, the concern you should have should be, do steroids affect my cholesterol? Do they affect my blood pressure, my liver enzymes? And do these consequences or effects, do these consequences cause me health problems over time? But this is getting into details, and today I want to keep it sort of like a high level. I want to make a statement culturally about steroids. These kind of steroids that we're talking about are a man's way of essentially customizing his hormone levels. And think about how different this is than women's issues and the feminism movement. Women take birth control. Women take drugs at menopause that alter their hormone levels. They believe it's their right. And I agree. Many liberals believe that if birth control is not fully funded by the government, that it's an attack on women and women's rights. But when we talk about male hormones, testosterone, you're going to have a much harder time getting a prescription at the doctor's office. You're going to have a much harder time, even if you get one, getting your insurance to pay for it. And because of that, we've created this gigantic black market of steroids. If 9 out of 10 doctors refuse to give women birth control prescriptions, you better believe there'd be a black market for birth control. So why is there a difference? Why are women's hormones and men's hormones treated so differently? I don't think for a second that it's because of any documented evidence that would suggest male hormones are a danger. All the studies on steroids, even in the highest doses, come back with minimal side effects. Certainly, there's no more evidence that male hormones are more dangerous than women's hormones. There's actually a lot of research out there that suggests that birth control has negative consequences, that estrogen at menopause causes all sorts of issues. But society has concluded, at least in 2017, that women get to make their own decisions about their own hormones. For men, we're not there yet. So again, why the difference? The only thing I can come up with is because they work. And in this case, I'm talking about male hormones. Now, they're not miracle drugs, and we'll get into that misconception maybe, but they do work. When you combine testosterone or other anabolic androgenic steroids with good exercise program and a good diet, you can see changes in the body composition that just aren't attainable naturally. And I think when you accomplish something with drugs that you can't without drugs, there's going to be resistance to it. I mean, the research documenting psychedelic drugs and how they unlock the human brain and how the human brain can do things on psychedelic drugs it's not capable of otherwise, that's like not arguable. That proof is conclusive. Yet, for some reason, it doesn't pique our mind about the possibilities of human intelligence, and instead we get scared. We assume they must be dangerous and that we resist any further experimentation. In other words, I think human overperformance scares people. I think human overperformance scares people away. And let's talk about the way that guys take steroids, because it's very different. Not everyone who takes steroids is taking them the same way. So let's talk about these. First and foremost is probably the biggest group, which is called hormone replacement therapy. And that's when a guy who's over 30 or over 35 has decreased testosterone levels, and we all do. Everyone over 30, every male over 30, we all have low testosterone. It's a fraction of what it was when we were 18. And when you're in that position and you decide that you want to take a low dose of testosterone year-round to raise your levels, we call that hormone replacement therapy. So basically your levels are here in the toilet and we want to bring them up to a very high level. We go to the doctor and they prescribe you something called hormone replacement therapy. And when a doctor gives you a prescription for HRT, as we call it, the plan is probably not for you just to take it for a little while. Because if you take steroids now and you need them now, you're going to need them the rest of your life. It's not going to get better as you get older. So when you take this low dose, you can still see improvements in muscle mass and athletic performance, but most men who are seeking this kind of steroid use are usually doing it for other reasons beyond athletic performance and muscle gains. Many, if not most, of these HRT patients are doing it for other reasons like increased libido or increased energy or just a general sense of well-being or youthfulness. So how big of a dose is this low dose? Well, typically what they're trying to do is raise your testosterone levels from where they're at now to somewhere much higher, but not crazy high. Like as high as some 18-year-old boys might have, right? When you're at your peak testosterone levels, that's where they're taking you to. So it's on the high end of normal, but nothing that humans don't have on their own. And that's why you'd have a hard time convincing me that there's any health risk associated with raising a man's testosterone levels within the typical human limits. Okay, so that's the first way. That's probably the largest group of men out there taking steroids is in that HRT group, the hormone replacement therapy group. The second way that guys take steroids is in cycles. And I think that that's the common perception. If you don't know a ton about it and you know guys take steroids, you know, oh, they cycle steroids. And you hear that in the gym culture. Oh, what cycle are you running? What are you going to run this cycle? What's a good cycle for me? And what a cycle means is that you run steroids for maybe 8 to 12 weeks, you make some improvements, and then you take a break for a while. And then you run them again, and then you take another break. It used to be the consensus that this was the safe way to do it. The guys who are out here in Saipan who take steroids, this is how they take them. But on the mainland, I think this is a fading trend. It was believed for a while that this was the safe way to do it, but now I think there's some common thought out there that maybe it's hard to put your body through this, that you have these blasted high hormone levels, then you are off of them, then you're back on them, then you're off. It's a lot of adjustment for the body. So I think this is a trend that's sort of fading because when you're cycling on and off the drugs, you're also going to be yo-yoing up in weight. I remember a friend of mine asking this really big guy at the gym saying, when should I take a break from taking these? And the guy looks at him and says, when you feel like getting smaller. And I think that mindset has gotten us to where we are now. So where we are now is where guys take, the third way is where guys take fairly large dosages almost year round. Maybe they take like a 6-week break once a year and reset their bodies, give themselves a little break. Or maybe they go down just to a low dose, like an HRT level dose for 10 weeks. People call that a cruise. And I think the reason that we've trended towards this heavier dose for more of the year is because of social media and this on all the time approach where guys don't want to have an off season where they look small. They want to look in peak condition year round. Now, back in the 90s, which is, I think, widely considered the most competitive of bodybuilding eras, guys used to take long breaks, like 3 or 4 month breaks. Not just from the drugs, from everything. They would take 3 or 4 months off the gym, off eating like a bodybuilder, everything. Then January or February would come around, and they'd show up at Gold's Gym in Venice, weighing 185 pounds, looking like a normal dude. And then over the next 6 months, they'd recapture all those gains, because it's always easy to get back something you've already had. And they'd be ready for the show. Competitive bodybuilders were extremely comfortable being seen at less than their best. They looked at it like the competition is September 30th, I'll be ready September 30th. So if my perception is right, the guys are using more drugs for longer now, do I think that physiques are better now as a result? I mean, clearly the answer is no. But how relevant is any of this talk anyway? Like, how many guys in 2017 are using these drugs? A lot. Nearly everyone who competes in bodybuilding. Think about it. There's bodybuilding, and then there's natural bodybuilding. It's not bodybuilding and enhanced bodybuilding. Of the guys competing at the NPC level, NPC is the main amateur organization in America. What percentage of guys competing in that at that level are using steroids? I mean, it's easily more than 90%. It's pretty close to 100%. And by the way, I like natural bodybuilding. Back on the mainland, I used to go to natural shows all the time, and I supported them and their sport. But if you go to natural shows, you can tell it's very different. The guys are much smaller, and they're much softer, and they have all their hair. If you go to a regional bodybuilding show, a typical non-drug tested bodybuilding show, there's not a lot of hair left on their heads. You go to a natural show, it's like everyone looks like Jason Priestley from 90210. So it's very different. It's very apparent when you go that there's some differences between the two. So anyway, what about just like guys at the gym? Like, how many guys are using steroids who aren't into bodybuilding? At a corporate gym in Seattle, where I'm from, on like a Tuesday night when it's pretty busy, I'd say there's probably 15 guys who are on steroids either currently or recently in the gym. 15 at like a Seattle LA Fitness at one time. Now in Orange County, like down in Irvine, California, I've worked out there a lot. There's probably 40 guys at the gym at once who are all using steroids currently. And probably none of those guys are competing in anything. Just guys who are using steroids as part of a gym routine to get better results, to post better looking pictures on Instagram. So it's extremely common. But I do think that steroids have become sort of this mythical thing. I think that people who don't know about them, they assume they do a lot more than that they actually do. Because steroids are great for putting on size. But I think that athletic performance is extremely overrated, especially in weight class sports. Yes, steroids will make a 150-pound guy stronger even if he doesn't get bigger. But what they're really good at is turning a 150-pound guy into a 170-pound guy. And people will ask me sometimes, do you think so-and-so is using steroids? And look, anything is possible. There's always genetic freaks. But if you're bigger than me and leaner than me, I suspect you're taking steroids. But on the other hand, if you're stronger than me, you can easily be natural. The Iron Lions are natural, and we got guys deadlifting over 600 pounds. And that's super strong, but that's not abnormally strong. Guys who are 200 pounds with full abs, that'd be pretty weird for them to be natural. That's pretty unheard of. And one important thing to mention about steroids is that they're a game of diminishing returns. The first time you take them, you'll never get results like that ever again. Then you've got to use more to try to replicate the gains you got the first time. So you double your dose and you're getting 10% more improvement. You double it again and you get like another 5%. And I think that's how it potentially becomes dangerous. And I've really been into computers lately, so I'll use a computer analogy. To play games, if you have no graphics card in your computer, you get no performance. But if you get a $200 graphics card, it's like a whole new world. Almost all the games are available to you. I mean, it's not perfect, but you can play almost everything. If you spend $400 on a graphics card, you can play these games now on all the highest settings, but it's basically the same games. And if you double that and you buy an $800 graphics card, you can now play the games in the highest settings at a better resolution, but it's the same set of games and it's the same setting, and you just pay double. And if you really want to be crazy, you could spend another $800 and get 2 of these fancy graphics cards, and you can see the difference in benchmark testing, but the human eye can't even tell the difference. Now you spent $1,600 on 2 graphics cards, and your experience may be awesome, but it's not totally different than much cheaper options. And in bodybuilding, everyone has like 8 graphics cards. Okay, people use way too many drugs. They go way past the point of optimal cost benefit. And I think that's where guys are getting themselves into trouble a little bit. But if you're looking for a podcast that's going to tell you the steroids are going to kill you, this is not going to be the podcast. However, saying that, I would also not encourage others to use steroids, and I'll tell you why. Because guys come up to me all the time and they say, you know, what do you think? Should I be taking steroids? And if you're asking me if you should be taking steroids, my answer is no. If you're the kind of guy who's going to use steroids, you wouldn't be looking for my approval. And if you're someone who's going to take steroids and I told you not to take them, you're going to take them anyway. So that's why I tell everyone if they ask me, should you take them, I say no. And I support their legality, obviously, and I support guys pursuing their passions. But I've also got to face reality that, you know, steroids and performance-enhancing drugs in general are pretty much unnecessary. I mean, you can get through your life with low testosterone levels. And you could say the same thing about women. Women can get through their lives without birth control. So I'm not going to tell a random woman that she should be on birth control. So I'm not going to tell a random guy that he should be using steroids. So if you're looking for my blessing to take these powerful hormones, you're not going to get it. But I like to talk about the subject openly because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, that, you know, it's a major part of the gym culture right now. And we'll be talking a lot more about steroids in future shows because it is a big part of the industry. But I wanted to touch on it today from like a 10,000 foot view, and we'll get more in depth into some of the specifics another time. Okay, something I like and something I hate. So something I like. So this is actually something I miss. I miss tanning beds. And I was expecting that living on Saipan that I'd be tan all the time, but that's just not the case. There's a few things that make it difficult. And the first is work. When I was unemployed, my tan was excellent. But now with work, you know, and I'm inside from 8 to 5 every day, you know, the days here are not much longer than that. And so your chance of the sun during the week is pretty slim. Then when you get to the weekend, it's not always sunny. I mean, right now we're in the middle of rainy season, which seems to go on forever. And lining up, you know, getting lucky and having your beach time line up with sun time is sort of rare and been difficult lately. And also, even when the sun's out, the sun is just so intense. Tanning here is hard. It's like putting dinner rolls in the oven. It's like, okay, they're cooking, they're burnt. There was like no sign of it coming, and all of a sudden they're burnt, and you're burnt. And obviously it's bad to get sunburn. And now the modern tanning beds are so safe. They're so much safer than the natural sun that I miss them. Never mind the tan lines. That was a nice perk too. And I wish we could have a tanning bed on Saipan, but I'd probably be the only one using it. So I understand why it's not here. Okay, something I hate. I thought about this a lot this week, that I really miss and regret the decline of the online fitness forums. When I started getting into the gym lifestyle in 2003-ish, there were a lot of active forums online with some tremendous resources. I used to have like 30,000 posts on Elite Fitness. There was a Professional Muscle, that was a big deal, Outlaw Muscle, and these are all pretty worthless now. Muscular Development still has a forum that I'm on sometimes, but it's pretty limited unless you want to discuss the pro bodybuilding scene. I think with the expansion of YouTube and other social media options, the forums are kind of dying out. All that's left is sponsors and moderators, and there's hardly any members. The non-fitness forums I use, though, are still going strong, so it's not a forums thing. I use Reddit and Tom's Hardware, but fitness, nobody appears to want to share that information through forums anymore. And I learned a lot on the forums, and there was a ton of misinformation. But after a while, you knew what guys could offer you good advice and credible information. And now I think we all watch YouTube, and we find people that telling us what we want to hear. But I think we benefit more from a back and forth, which is why I plan on bringing some guests on soon with a different perspective than myself. Okay, something to check out this week. So each week I give you something to check out. This episode was about steroids, so I'm going to give you something about that. I think most people by now have seen Bigger, Stronger, Faster by Chris Bell. So even though that's the gold standard of steroid movies, I'm going to recommend an HBO Real Sports piece that I'll link below. They did a piece on steroids many, many years ago, and I think it holds up rather well. I just watched it last week. They basically did a story where they went out to talk about the research showing how bad steroids are for you, and it turned out they couldn't find any research. So I think it's a pretty fair piece overall, and I think that you'll like it, so check it out. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out. I think in the next episode, I'm going to reflect on my last 1 year of training as a powerlifter and talk about my thoughts on that. If you have any other ideas for other podcasts, just leave your suggestions in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.